Welcome to the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Englander. Paul, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, likewise, for sure. I got a chance to hear your talk at the BABA Summit in August and then really enjoyed it and definitely opened my mind to the possibilities of AI. So for those that don't know you, do you mind talking a little bit about your background and kind of how you got involved with AI?
Sure. I started my agency PR 2020 in November of 2005. Some people may have heard my name associated with like the HubSpot community. We were HubSpot's first partner agency back in 2008. And then I wrote the marketing agency blueprint book in 2011. So I know that there's a pocket of the industry that thinks of me as like the author of the agency book. So that was kind of my, I wouldn't say past life. I'm still the CEO of the agency. I did sell the agency in September of last year, but I still am the CEO. But I've spent the majority of the last decade working on artificial intelligence, and started doing public speaking about it in 2015. Created our Marketing AI Institute in 2016, and then launched our Marketing AI conference in 2019. And it became its separate business. And so I, kind of run both of those companies. But more and more of my time goes to the Marketing AI Institute nowadays.
Yeah, very cool. And was there, an experience in the agency space that got you involved in AI? Like, when did you get that idea where you're like, okay, once I'm kind of stair stepping out of the agency, I'm going to go this route? Like, what sort of inspired it?
It happened pretty naturally. When I was writing the marketing agency blueprint, I actually wrote that in spring of 2011. So from April to June of 2011. And that was the year that IBM Watson won on Jeopardy, defeated Brad Rutter and Ken Jennings. And so that was actually my inflection point for AI. It's like, well, what is that technology? So I was actually working on a specific scenario of how do I do marketing strategy better? How do I solve for how to spend 10,000, 100,000, 1 million, depending on what my clients' budgets were? How do I create optimal spend of that money? And I'd become convinced by 2012, after 12 years in the agency world, that I had no idea how to do that. That there was thousands of ways you could build models, strategies, game plans to spend that money and achieve results. And I didn't know exactly what AI was, but I theorized that whatever this technology was might help me build smarter strategies. And so that actually is what led me down the path of trying to understand artificial intelligence, which took me years. And then after I finally developed a kind of what I considered a base level true understanding of the technology, then the challenge was, well, what do we do with this? Like, how do we apply it? How do we find the right tools? And how do we actually integrate it into what we were doing as an agency?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I kind of have two questions in one. I guess, can you talk a little bit about like tangibly what you're doing at Marketing AI Institute, and coupled with that, to get kind of a feel for the situation on the ground, like how do most marketers feel about AI now? Like when you say AI to these people, to this audience, what do most people think?
My perception, and I've talked with thousands of people about this, so I think it's a pretty accurate perception, is they think it's sci-fi, for one. So most people in general think it's what you see in the movies, these like sentient beings who are going to take our jobs, and there's this fear factor associated with it. You have like Westworld and Matrix and Ex Machina, like there's all these things you see and you assume like that's what people AI is. When people talk about it, that's not what AI is. Like none of that is achievable today. Like you don't have these sentient beings that can achieve multiple objectives. It's a dream of AI researchers. It's a theory that we can get there, but that is not what it is. AI is technology like built to do very specific things. So when you think about your life every day, when you use Netflix, it's using machine learning, the subset of AI, to recommend shows to you. It's learning your preferences and it's recommending. It's personalizing an experience. Spotify does the same with music. Google Maps does the same with routing you to destinations. It's making predictions about outcomes. The other way you see it is in language and vision. So when you unlock your iPhone with your face, it's using computer vision. It's teaching machine to see. When you talk to Alexa or Siri, its ability to understand you, like quote unquote understand what you're saying, and then respond to you, doesn't exist without artificial intelligence. When Gmail finishes your sentences for you, it's predicting the words that you are going to write before you write them. all of that, all these things that we use AI for every day and don't think about it, that they're made possible by these technologies. And so what we're trying to do at the Institute is look at marketing and sales software and say, okay, the software you use today to send emails or manage your ad spend, or create and send your social media shares, right now the vast majority of that is all human all the time. You're doing everything. Someone just built software for you to write rules on top of what it should do. What's happening though is the software is actually getting smarter and being able to write its own rules. It can figure out when to send the emails and what subject lines to use. It can figure out what hashtags to use in your social shares and which images to put in them and when to send them on which channels. Like, that's the whole idea, is that marketing can become smarter and you as a professional can become smarter in how you do it.
Yeah, and I think what I've sort of noticed is there's like this weird kind of like snowplow like dichotomy of extremes where people either think it's ex machina or they think they're being sold something that's BS, right? Because we've seen that AI tag get applied to so many things that
And many
may or may
times they
not.
are being sold BS. That's a
Right,
problem.
right. Yeah. So I guess to bring it to a question, can we talk about the terminology a little bit? Like, how do you differentiate between AI, machine learning, deep learning, and maybe other things?
Yeah, so the best definition I've found of artificial intelligence is just the science of making machines smart. And that comes from Demis Hassabis, who's the founder of DeepMind, which was acquired by Google years ago. And what he means by that is machines don't inherently know how to do anything. They don't understand humans, they don't understand language, they don't have vision, they can't see, they can't do anything. So it's making these machines, the software and the hardware we use, actually have functional intelligence, like to be smarter and to help us be smarter. So AI is just this umbrella of tools and technologies that make machines smart. Machine learning is the primary subset. That is specifically the machine learning from data and making predictions about outcomes. So in the case of sales, it might like take in 10,000 conversions, learn from that data what a good lead looks like, and then apply intelligent lead scoring to future leads, and then evolve its prediction as more and more leads come in. So that's like a very practical application of machine learning. Deep learning is a subset of that. It's actually trying to teach the machine to function like the human brain. So the human brain has billions of neurons that processes images. So like when you see, if you think about like an autonomous vehicle, how Tesla is trying to do autonomous driving, you see a person in a telephone pole, machine doesn't know the difference between those things. It processes pixels, and it's like it sees shapes and colors and all these things. Like that's what the human brain does, is like we see in these layers. That's what you're trying to do with machines, is like give them the ability to see and to hear and to understand and to speak similar to humans. And that's where deep learning comes in. It's trying to give these machines this ability to do human-like things. So AI umbrella, machine learning primary subset. The majority of things you would use in marketing would be machine learning based. And then deep learning is sort of the developing area that more and more is being integrated, but it's relatively new in its application to business and to marketing. I mean, in the last decade, new.
Yeah, and as usual, there's the futures here, but not evenly distributed kind of
Yes.
dynamic. And what happened this summer with that open AI demonstration, if I have that right, if that's the right organization, it was just mind boggling. Do you know what I'm talking about with basically putting
Yeah.
in like very basic commands to do a console, and then the AI figures out how to create anything from it?
Yeah, so OpenAI is a really important organization. It was originally founded to sort of advance research and move towards this idea of general intelligence, to achieve this general intelligence. Like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel were some of the early, investors and creators of that. So what they're mostly known for today is GPT-3. So GPT-3 is what's called a large language model, and it has the ability to generate language at scale. So you give it a prompt like agency growth or whatever, and it could actually write an article about how to grow an agency in theory. So GPT-3 has been used in a lot of cases. It was licensed. It's actually, Microsoft has an exclusive $1 billion license for it. So there's over 300 AI tools that have been created, like Jarvis comes to mind. Hyperwrite is another one. That are actually copy.ai. They're built on the back of GPT-3. So they enable you to write social media shares and emails and blog posts and they're using the GPT-3 framework. Now, GPT-3 isn't the only player in this world. Like Google's been building their own. Microsoft has a version that's supposedly 10 times stronger than GPT-3. Like it's a race to create language. That is, personalization and language generation are sort of like the holy grails right now that many are pursuing in terms of the application of AI to marketing and sales.
Yeah, and that's kind of our domain. We do a lot of outbound sales, and we're really good at creating these templates that look fully personalized, even if they're not. And I think that people are relatively okay with that, because there's a human that's sort of looking at lists and getting it 50, 60 yard to the 60-yard line, and then AI and robots are taking it the rest of the way. I think another thing that's going on now is, a human face and or a human voice, acting as an AI. And I guess I'd be lying if I said that doesn't freak me out a little bit. So I guess I'm asking, how do you feel about that technology? And is there a way that can be implemented that doesn't leave us all kind of like empty, skeptical, jaded of everyone at all times? How do you see that
Yeah,
playing out? Yeah.
so a good way to think about artificial intelligence is kind of like the advent of the internet itself. So if we went back to like 1993, 1995, when the internet became like a consumer technology, something that the average consumer could access. If we were sitting there on the precipice of the future of the internet, we could look there and say, my gosh, this is going to change everything. Communications, the ability to access information, it's going to be amazing. And then somebody else would sit there and say, yeah, but what about a dark web? Like, what if people use the internet in evil ways to spread misinformation and disinformation and conspiracy theories, and actually created a place where illicit things could happen? Like, maybe we shouldn't build the internet. That's very much where we are with AI. It's going to change everything. It will be infused into everything we do in the next decade. There's no stopping that. I could sit here and list for you hundreds, if not thousands, of ways it can be good for society and business and humanity. I could probably come with an equal list of ways it could be used in negative applications. So the reality is that there are going to be bad actors who use AI to do things that the average person would agree ethically and morally should not be done, including the negative application of deepfakes. So deepfakes is kind of, a technology people have heard about, most likely, deepfake Tom Cruise and like these funny things. But that technology is getting really, really advanced really fast. And so, like you're saying, could I create a digital avatar of myself and then just type text of what I want my digital avatar to say and have it say it? Yes, most likely with the technology that exists today, working with the right tech partners, I could actually create my digital avatar could be saying exactly what I'm saying right now, and you wouldn't even know it wasn't me sitting here saying it. If you have the resources and the tech to do it, it's doable today. That means that there is a near future where you may actually be interacting with something that appears to be the human form of someone and it's not. So it's a slippery slope. Like our conference's tagline is more intelligent, more human. And I created that back in 2018 when we launched the conference, because back then I had fears about the negative applications of AI. And so what we're trying to do at the Institute is race forward to educate people on what it is and what it can do, so that we can positively affect its use in as big a way as possible. So the more people in our industry that understand it, understand the good and the bad, that can put ethical standards in place within their own organizations about the use of the technology, then the greater impact we can have on its adoption in business and in society. And so that's like at a high level, like, why do I do what I do? Growing a media and event business is great. Like, making an impact and helping people grow their business, fine. But at a bigger picture, like I think it's very, very important that we as business leaders and in society are having these conversations about the downside of AI.
Yeah, because it seems like it's something that would be almost impossible to regulate, from any sort
It's
of
very
outside
hard.
force.
Ask
Yeah.
Facebook how hard it is. I mean, let's be honest, I don't know that Facebook has tried very hard to stop disinformation and misinformation on their site, but it's really, really hard to rely on AI to catch everything that shouldn't be on Facebook or YouTube or like whatever the social media platform is. There are probably hundreds of people at Facebook working on AI just to filter content and remove things that shouldn't be up there. And what they know is you need humans in the loop to do it. Humans have to be tagging, like if you have violent footage or something, a human has to watch it and then tell the AI that that was bad. They have to tag the video or the image or the text, tell the machine it was bad, and the machine can learn. So
Right.
there are people whose job is to watch the underbelly of society on social media platforms and then tell a machine it's bad.
Yeah, and I haven't thought about that specifically, but that's got to be the worst job on earth. And
It
I
really does. Like
feel
it's
bad for them.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
yeah. But from a sales and marketing perspective, similar concept. It's like who teaches the machine what is unethical or bad? Like humans do
Right.
all of that. So if you run a company that does sales and marketing in an unethical way, then there's a likelihood that the AI you would use in the future would learn those behaviors and those decision making processes.
Yeah, and I'm sure we could talk a lot more about that, and that becomes a very, very philosophical, lofty conversation very fast. But
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, and that is, it's a fascinating one. But I guess to kind of bring this down to earth, you talk a lot about how agencies can get started with AI. You talk about the problem based model and the use case model. Can you talk
Mhm.
about those a little bit?
Yeah, so the simplest way to apply AI is take a list of all the things you or your agency, your team does in a week or a month. And it might be like we write 5 blog posts a month, we send 15 emails, we develop workflows, we create content strategies, we manage ad spend, whatever those things are. And then just make a list for yourself in a spreadsheet and put like how many hours a month you spend on those things. And you can just apply, like I think we talk about this idea of um, the impact probability, or like how much is this going to impact your business, and how likely is it to be able to be automated. Like you kind of look at these different scenarios, but just go search AI for blog post writing, or AI for email marketing, or AI for subject line writing, or whatever it may be, and just find tools that have been built for these specific tasks that your team is spending a lot of time on, and do a demo or do a trial. Like just the best way to start with AI is pick a use case, find a tech created to do it, and just experience it yourself. Because it's the other perception I think people have is like it costs too much money. Like I'm not a big enough company to use AI. It's going to cost too much money. It doesn't. Like there are hundreds of tools that are probably less than $100 a month, many of them with a free trial, where you can test this technology and see for yourself if it's viable or not.
Yeah, and can you give an example or two of some of the most common things that you're seeing with the clients you're working with and so on?
Yeah, so like a couple, we use a lot of Market Muse we use for content strategy and optimization of existing content on our site, because it looks at, like, let's say I want to write a blog post about how to build an agency marketing strategy or something like that. It would go in and actually recommend to us the questions to answer within that post. So it'll actually suggest, hey, you're going to want to cover email strategy and content strategy. Like you're going to want to cover these things. Here's the common questions people ask. And it can even develop like a brief based on those questions. So kind of give you a starting point for your blog post. It can also assess, like in our case at the Institute, we have like 900 articles we publish. It can go through and identify which within those 900 are candidates to be republished with updated information. So it may say, hey, this one's ranking pretty well. You could probably rank even higher if you enhance this post by answering these 3 questions and injecting some additional information into this post. It's great. You go in and you
Yeah.
do it. So it's an assistant in that case. Another one I really love is Descript. We use it for our podcast because it actually automatically creates a transcription of everything, but it enables you to edit the video and the transcript on the fly. Like it can remove all filler words for you. You just click remove filler words and it goes through and removes all the filler words from the video itself. Like kind of seems like magic, but that one's really cool. We do play around with the GPT-3 tools like Hyperwrite and Jarvis. We've tested all of those, and our team uses them in some cases to develop like draft social media shares and draft copy. So we experiment. I mean, there's probably a dozen or so that we regularly experiment with. A couple of them are kind of core technology to us these days.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think with that, you talk a lot about a concept called marketer to machine scale or M2M scale.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the key concept there is that there's these levels of intelligent automation. So again, part of the fear factor is that it's going to take our job or it's just going to make us useless as humans. And that's not the case. So much like the autonomous vehicle industry has these levels of automation of cars based on what the human driver is still required to do. So at level 5 or full autonomy, you don't need a steering wheel in any conditions. Like it could drive in the snow in Cleveland in the middle of winter with no steering wheel. That's level 5. That doesn't exist. Um, Tesla Autopilot is currently level 2, and that's the one that people are probably most familiar with. So we think of marketing automation in the same sense that as you think about AI and all these different use cases, you think about these levels of automation, what we call the marketer to machine scale. So level 0 is all human all the time, which is what most of what you're doing today is. Level 1 is some machine. Maybe it's like making some recommendations. Like you could think about Google Analytics this way. If you go into Google Analytics and you click on the Insights tool, it's surfacing some things that it's finding, and it makes some recommendations to you of basic things to do. It's appears to be very simplistic. The tech itself is pretty advanced, but the use is pretty simplistic. Like it doesn't really change your job as a Google Analytics person, like looking at analytics, but it surfaces some things for you. So now imagine that applied to everything, your sales, emails, your content strategies. Like it's just there as an assistant, identifying trends and making some recommendations about things you can do. And so that's where most of the AI is going to be in the next few years. It's just going to be there as kind of an assistant, helping you do your job better and smarter and faster. Over time, there might be some tech that evolves that gets to like level 3, where maybe 75% of what you're doing in that job is actually done by the machine, and you're just there to oversee it, set the goals, make sure it stays on tracks and does it, what you're asking it to do efficiently.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting, and there's probably like lots of utility to the things that are out there. It seems to me though that like a lot of the stuff that's stopping this, the technology from being really useful is kind of just like the walled garden siloing of information, right? So for example, you use the Google Analytics, that example, and Google Analytics says you need to go optimize this, that, and the third on your site in order to do this. It seems like that task is relatively easy for a robot to take care of versus a human. But the problem is the robot then has to have domain over Google Analytics and your site, and the variables just kind of start increasing rapidly. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to bring this to a question, I guess, like, is there technology that is like, getting its tentacles, maybe that's a little too pejorative of a way to put it, but getting its tentacles into like a lot of different interfaces at once, or is most of this happening in just like specific domains in order for it to be effective?
Unfortunately, most of it is still happening in individual domains where the data is not integrated into your overall platform. At an enterprise level, I think there's a lot more effort to do that. Like, give example is like, let's say you have a conversational agent on your site, like a Drift. Awesome, like it can learn from its data. But let's say your CRM isn't connected to that conversational agent, and so it may not know that you're coming to the site and you've been a customer for 5 years. And so when you ask a question, the conversational agent is maybe learning you for the first time, and it doesn't know anything about you, and has to go through this decision tree of like, who is this person? Are they a customer? Are they not? And now I'm like 5 questions deep, when all I wanted was like you to know that I'm already a customer and I already know all these things you're asking me, and you know all these things about me. So that's just a really practical example of if the stuff isn't connected. But now, as we can all imagine, like we all have dozens of tools we're using. So if that data is living in all these different silos, then it's really hard for AI to achieve its full potential. And there's very few organizations that I'm familiar with that have found ways to bring it all together and build when I started on the path of trying to figure this stuff out, this like true intelligence engine that knew everything that was going on, everything possible about each of the customers and prospects, and could surface that in real time to drive the marketing and sales teams and customer service teams to make recommendations and to really create value for people and personalize experiences. It's hard to do, and there aren't many organizations doing it yet.
Right. But even just this stuff done at a small scale, but in a lot of different ways, can have huge effects, on your bottom line, I think. And with that in mind, can you talk a little bit about like, if an agency owner is listening and they're like, I know there's a bunch of stuff, but I don't know what it is that could benefit from this. Like, how do you get started with it? How do you train your team? Like, what's that jumping off point tend to look like?
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about just pilot it. Like, you're not going to jump all in and just be like, all right, our agency's got to have an AI roadmap, and we're going to put AI in everything we do this year. Like, that's not how it's going to work. What I would recommend people do is pick each quarter this year and do one pilot project with AI. So maybe in Q1 it's content strategy. Like, let's figure out a way to build better strategies or create content more efficiently. And maybe Q2 is paid media spend. Like, maybe you're managing 100K a month and paid media for your clients, and you're still doing it all human based. Like, that's crazy. Um, I'm sorry, but like, media buying is, I love media buyers. We do some media buying. That profession is ripe to be massively disrupted by AI. And again, it's not going to do away with media buying, but the role of the human in that process is going to evolve, and you're going to have way more intelligence to make decisions with, and to like focus more on the creativity side and things like that. So I would just pick the things you do as an agency and say, okay, the four main services we offer are these categorically. Let's do a pilot project in each of those areas over the coming year, and let's see what we learn.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that was going to be my next question is like, what jobs are actually at risk from AI and media buying? I had another one in my head in the medical space, but I'm blanking on it now. Are there any others that you think are going to be phased out in the next few years?
It, what I always say is like, if all you do is a repetitive thing, like if you can sit there and say, my entire job is to do these 7 steps over and over and over again. So I like, if all you do is landing page optimization, for example, like, I would start looking for a new career path. Like, if you can write a rule to do your job for you, and there's very little strategy, creativity, understanding of humans and empathy and like uniquely human things that go into doing your job, then a machine's going to be able to do it better than you and faster than you, very fast, very quickly. I don't know of many jobs like that, though. Like, I don't know in the marketing field of many of our roles that are truly just a bunch of, we could write an algorithm to do the job, and as long as
Yeah.
the AI was there, like, it could do it. So I think there's just gonna be a lot of evolution of roles, and creativity and writing is one of them. Like, we just wrote a book, and I tried to use AI as much as possible within the book itself, but the AI couldn't have written the book. Like, there's no way. And maybe, like, I don't know, a dozen or so of the tactical things that went into writing the book we used AI for. But overall, like, we still had to write the book. We still have to create the promotional plan. Like, I still got to go give the talks. Like,
Yeah.
it's not taking any of that away from what we do.
Right. It at least helps minimize the scary blank page a little bit, but that's there's
Right. I mean,
still a
we
lot of
probably
humanity.
saved
Yeah.
we saved maybe 100 hours or so in the production of the book using AI tools. I still wrote the whole thing. Like, it didn't write it for us. So that's the way I kind of look at it. Is it's just there as a support mechanism if you understand what it is and how to use it.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense and really exciting stuff. Kind of getting towards the end of our time, I'm curious, like what's exciting you about what's coming up this year? Last year we saw this, all the developments from OpenAI. Is there anything you're looking forward to in particular?
So I think that a machine's ability to generate language is going to follow similar to Moore's law did with processing power in computer chips. That, Moore's law of the ability of chips to process data is going to double every 18 months or so. I think we're in a I don't know where the end point would be, but I think in the coming years we're going to see a similar thing occur with the ability for machines to generate language, and that's going to have massive implications in sales and marketing, in writing and journalism, anywhere where language is created. And so I don't know that I can say I'm actually excited about that, but I'm realistic about it, and I'm trying to comprehend what that means to our industry.
Yeah, and it'll be really interesting to see where it goes. And I think that the applications are already out there; they're just not widely known. So if you can go look at this stuff and read entire articles, and then at the end, it's like, by the way, this was all AI, and you're like, oh, what? It's really freaky. So, Paul, this has been an absolute pleasure. How can people follow what you're up to and learn more about this stuff?
Yeah, the website is just marketingaiinstitute.com. We have a conference coming up in August of this year, an in-person conference. So that'll be in Cleveland. You want to check that out. And then LinkedIn is probably the best way to connect with me. I'm pretty good about responding to connection requests there and messages on LinkedIn. So yeah, just look me up on LinkedIn, and love to connect and hear your story and answer any questions you might have.
Awesome. Paul, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.